Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the ninth episode of Polity Research's podcast, The Polling Station. My name is Ernie Paikopoulos, CEO of Polity, and I'll once again be your host since nobody else is available. Today we'll be terrible joke. Today we'll be discussing the ins and outs of the 2024 U.S. presidential election, and while it's still a full 15 months away, events surrounding the election are shifting every single day. And, frankly, what started out as a rather boring rematch of a couple of octogenarians, although I think Trump is a little younger at this point, but essential octogenarians, is suddenly shaping up to be a pretty interesting battle in 2024 for a whole host of reasons. So to help us in this discussion, we have two of our favorite guests here with us today. David Paleologos, president of DAPA Research and director of the Suffolk University Research Center in Boston, and David Williams, president of Williams and Associates, a polling firm based in Salem, Massachusetts. So welcome to the two Daves.
Hey, hi,
Great to
Ernie.
be here.
Hey, I think you guys have logged the most minutes on this podcast of any other people.
I just I just want you to know I'm channeling my inner Ernie Paikopoulos so that if you're unavailable at some time for the podcast, I can just slide right in.
Well, you got the gray beard.
Get the gray beard going. That's what I'm doing.
Absolutely. I'll keep that in mind. We don't have a whole lot of time since the Zoom gods are only giving us about 40 minutes. So I do want to touch on our typical opening, though. And I want to know if you guys are drinking anything, and if so, what are you drinking?
Had some Gatorade about a half an hour ago.
Okay.
That's
What flavor?
the fruity red flavor.
Yeah.
I want to say absinthe, but I'm not drinking absinthe. I'm drinking just some mineral water today. A little Poland Springs.
Gotcha. I'm drinking some lemonade in my Centennial Northeastern glass here.
Like it.
All right.
Well, Huskies.
Yeah, go Huskies. Exactly. Okay, to start off, I want to talk a little bit about the event that happened last night, what some are calling the debate for second place in the GOP primary. Of course, the elephant that wasn't in the room, pun intended. By the way, I was upset that somebody used that joke last night before I could use it, so I'm a little upset. Anyway, but Donald Trump wasn't there. He was counter-programming head-to-head against the debate with Tucker Carlson. And I believe the latest count is he had 100 million viewers. Is that right?
Wow.
100 million viewers on I guess it's X now. We can't call it Twitter anymore. I haven't seen any ratings for the debate itself, but I'm sure he'll be touting the difference between those two audiences. But I'm curious from you guys, what do you think was the main outcome, the big takeaway out of last night's debate? Dave Paleologos, why don't we start off with you?
Yeah, so I think the group of eight kind of broke in half in terms of what candidates established some territory. And I think Ron DeSantis maintained himself. I don't think he gained. He didn't claw back a lot of the points that he's lost since the beginning of the year. Beginning of the year, he was in the mid-30s. Now he's in the mid-teens. So, did he claw back 20 points? Very unlikely. Vivek Ramaswamy had a good performance. He's a young candidate, 38 years old. Took a lot of incoming, but he gave it out as well. Didn't seem to be flustered or bothered by too much of what people were saying. I think it resonated with a lot of people. Nikki Haley had a terrific debate. I think her numbers will go up, like Ramaswamy's numbers will go up. And then you had Mike Pence, who pretty much dominated the debate in terms of time, but at times he appeared to be slow and angry and overly aggressive. And, it was almost like he was playing to a likely voter pool of 1950s Indiana voters than the current state of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
I think that'll play well in some areas. It, could get him into double digits, but I don't know much beyond that, how far he can grow.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Drudge poll that was done after the debate kind of authenticates that view that Vivek got about a third of the polling for winning the debate, and Nikki Haley came in second. Dave Williams, what do you think? What was your takeaway from last night?
Well, I think one of the big things is we're gonna see this field slim down a lot. I don't think Burgum, Asa Hutchinson, and Scott are gonna be able to, I mean, possibly maintain it in the next one. But I agree with Dave Paleologos. I thought that Haley did exceptionally well, particularly on the international issues, which of course she's got a lot of experience on, having been in at the United Nations. But I thought one of the most interesting things that she did is they were arguing about the money spent, who's responsible, Democrats, and some were pointing the fingers that the Republicans had a certain amount of culpability as well. The fact that she said it's time for an accountant to be in the White House, I thought that was a pretty good line. So I thought that was pretty good. I think Vivek again had a lot of energy and has a message that resonates particularly among that sort of Trump base. That one, things are stacked against individuals these days, and that two, that we've got to get rid of these professional politicians. We need the, what was he calling, the dark money, or the PAC funded individuals on the stage, which I think does resonate with the significant group. Christie was good. He was feisty. I agree with Dave. I thought Pence seemed very overly deliberate in a lot of his presentation, and I thought that message is something that again really hits to the conservative base, but does not really hit amongst independents who are going to be, from my perspective, I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreement on this with the group, that independents are going to be very determinative on who wins this next election, presidential election. I thought DeSantis held his own. He was very good on some points. I thought he looked a little weird, though. I mean, the visual, and again, this is totally unsubstantive, but the visuals were not great, I thought, for Ron DeSantis. But I thought he was forceful when he needed to be. I think Dave's absolutely right that he's probably going to claw back a little bit of the loss that he had, but probably not a whole lot.
Does Vivek have any staying power, though, or is he going to be the Marianne Williamson of the Republican Party? Do you think he's going to be around in 6 months?
Well, one of the things with having your moment after a debate is maintaining the lead. We saw what happened to Kamala Harris the summer before the last election. She jettisoned from nowhere to right at Joe Biden's heels, when she scolded him about busing in that debate question, but then she just dissipated and she lost it and she never got it back, which is why I think the debate for DeSantis was really important, because he's done the Kamala slide this time around. Yep. And unless he turns it around, he's going to end up, in the same place. Remains to be seen. I would agree with David Williams. I mean, when you think about this, there aren't a lot of real candidates here who are strong in both the GOP primary and in the general election. Haley has the ability to be that. DeSantis does, but I agree. He didn't look presidential. Yep. He looked like at times like an Alfred E. Newman bobblehead, where he was just doing this up and down, up and down, up and down, and making his points. And it was frustrating at the beginning of the debate. I thought his opening speech was fabulous, but at the beginning of the debate, he wasn't answering questions. He was just reverting back to rehearsed lines, and it was frustrating, I think, for Bret Baier. When he was trying to press him on answering the question as asked. Yeah. And that was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, you're right. People forget that Kamala didn't even make the first primary contest, right? She dropped out before the first election.
That's right.
After, as you say, having been a rising star early on, at this point back in 2019, I guess.
Right.
But okay. I'm going to try to do something that's probably pretty stupid. I'm going to try to simplify this whole thing by talking about it in terms of what I'm calling the 5 I's. Letter I: indictments, inflation, incumbency, internecine party warfare, and independent voters, as Dave Williams alluded to earlier. Obviously, there are other factors, the most important, I think, being abortion. I think that is going to be as telling in 2024 as it was in 2022, because I think people have pretty much accepted that that's what kept there from being a red wave, right? That the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the positioning that the Republican Party and Republican candidates took the wind out of their sails, basically, in 2022. And it's not going away, in my opinion, in 2024. But just kind of as a handy template, I'm using the 5 I's thing as a way for us to discuss a few of the issues in the campaign. So let's start with the first I: indictments. Trump is actually getting his mugshot, I guess, today, right, down in Georgia.
Yep.
How much will these Trump legal problems impact both the primary and general election? Obviously, so far, the primary, it's done nothing but help him increase his lead. But what about in the general election particularly? I'm curious about whether or not even MAGA or marginal MAGA voters are going to start to suffer a weariness factor here, that, you're going to be having court appearances, jury selections in 4 different jurisdictions right in the middle of the campaign. Are people going to get a little tired of it, even people who might have supported him? Or are people going to feel that he's being persecuted and he'll just continue to, ratchet up his numbers? What do you think?
Yeah, I think. Well, obviously, it's a very strange thing that the more indictments he gets, the more strength he seems to have, and he seems to actually want more indictments as we move along. So it's an extraordinarily unusual thing. I think it depends on how, we always, as the three of us know, and probably are, dream about it in our sleep, that perception is reality. It depends on how people are going to perceive this thing. And I think the interesting piece of this is you've got this whole Trump thing on one side that normally I would say completely disqualifies him, and yet you have on the other side what seems to be particularly partial treatment to the Biden family,
Right.
which I think just sort of emphasizes the difference and sort of throws fuel onto that fire that this is a persecution and not a prosecution of Trump.
No, I totally agree. Dave Paleologos, what about you? What do you think?
I have to go with history and what we're seeing in the polling from week to week, and I guess I would come down on the side that it will help him after his mugshot is taken today, and he'll be able to say in a week or two, I'm still up 30, 40 points, depending on what poll you're looking at. In the general election, if he's still standing, if he's able to postpone trials or maybe get some charges dropped in advance of trial in some of these cases, or if a case gets thrown out, it's only going to give voters the reinforcement that this was a hit job, and that all of these investigations and these indictments were designed to hurt the timing of the election.
Yeah.
And election interference, this is a big thing. I mean, democracy is polling at an all-time high compared to 10, 20 years ago. So I think, I think it could benefit him unless he is charged or found guilty. But I don't see that timing works.
Right. Yeah. Last night, one of the commentators I was watching said that, delay is Trump's biggest ally. That if he can continue this notion of persecution without actually going to Trump before the election, that's going to help him the most. So, and he's going to have his lawyers trying to delay, at every point in the process. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's totally new territory. Obviously, we've never had this situation in American history. So, we're going to all be learning together, I guess. Dave Williams, you made reference to perception being reality, and I think it was moving on to the inflation I think it was James Carville, right, who said it's the economy, stupid, in presidential elections.
Mm-hmm.
And in general, with some exceptions, I think that's been the case through past several elections. I'm curious to know what you think the perception of inflation will be by the time election day comes around. Is it going to be seen as coming, appreciably down enough so that it will help Joe Biden? Or are people still going to be paying, way too much for gasoline at the pump, way too much for food at Stop and Shop, to think things are actually better economically? And again, this is a perception versus reality thing, because it can be spun both ways, I think, even now. But so what do you think? What's the ultimate impact of the second I, inflation?
I think it's potentially a huge impact, because I don't really see, again, not being an economist and everything, but I don't particularly see that inflation is going to come down significantly. I mean, there have been no changes in terms of our policy towards energy, in particular. So I don't see gas prices coming down. And given the fact that the federal the deficit is so big at this point in time. I mean, I forget who threw out the number, but we're paying almost $1 trillion a year just to pay off the debt. Yeah. I don't see how that impacts our the economy in a positive way to bring inflation down. And if we keep getting into things where we're going to get into another debt ceiling argument, I think in the next in September or October, that's going to raise that issue again. So I don't really see it coming down, and I think if it doesn't come down, it gives the Republicans a huge amount of effort or a substance to go against Biden on.
Mm-hmm. Dave P., what do you think?
So we've had Joe Biden touting Bidenomics and all of these government statistics that show how vibrant the economy is, but people don't perceive it to be what it is. And so the result is that Donald Trump is polling dead even with Joe Biden, despite being indicted 4 times. Mm-hmm. That gives you a sense of what the disconnect is. And for all of the Polity podcast listeners, I'm going to give you a little teaser, which is that we're going to be doing a kitchen table poll with the Sawyer Business School and USA Today. We're going to be fielding it right after Labor Day, asking just kitchen table questions of what you just asked, Ernie, which is, are you planning to buy a house? Are you planning to spend more or less on holiday shopping? All of the, the kinds of make or break costs that people have, rent, mortgage, utilities, and so on, to really dig down and to find out what's going on in terms of kitchen table issues with just average Americans.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I saw recently that really hit home for me in terms of this issue is more people are drawing down their IRAs now than at any time in the last 50 years. Or I guess IRAs haven't been around that long, but however long they've been around. And they're drawing on them just to pay monthly costs, to pay the cable bill, to pay the mortgage, to pay for groceries. And that, to me, is the best indicator that things are just not the way Joe Biden is trying to portray them out there. So, okay, let's move on to the third I. And I don't think this one is particularly important, but it's the incumbency issue. The conventional wisdom is that incumbency is worth 2-3 points in a presidential election. But obviously it didn't help Donald Trump, didn't help George Bush the first, along with a bunch of other presidents. Do you think Joe Biden's kind of unique incumbency is going to help or hurt his chances? Is that going to be a real factor at all? David Williams?
I don't think at this time, I don't think so. I mean, I think we may be running into an era where incumbency is a little less important. I think what's going to determine the outcome of this is and again, particularly if it's Trump versus Biden again, because then you have to wonder who the real incumbent is. If I could posit that element, but I think, it comes down to performance. And I really think that you've got two things going on. One, the inflation aspect of it, the financial impact, negative financial impact that's happened with Biden economics, or Bidenomics, excuse me. And second is if you just look at the guy, I mean, showing him walking out of, I don't know whether it was the spinning class that he had or the Pilates class that they showed on the B reel with a cup of juice or whatever it was that he had coming out. The guy just does not look good. I won't say he's done compos mentis, but it seems like it's almost pretty close. He
Hmm.
seems to be doddering, I guess is the kind way to say that. And so I think when you get to that point, that particularly for him, that incumbency is not going to be a benefit for him.
Yeah. Dave P., how about you?
I would agree. I would agree with that. And if incumbency was such an indicator in this election with Joe Biden, why isn't he polling 6 points ahead?
Exactly. Good point. Yep. Right. At this point, you figure he would be most taking advantage of that factor, right? At this
I
point.
mean, there were some polls that had DeSantis beating Biden
by
in
like,
some states. So
yeah, by like 2 or 3 points, right? I mean, it was not insignificant. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I tend to agree. I don't think it's going to be as big a factor as it's been in the past. And I'm not sure this next I is either the internecine. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Is it internecine or internecine? I don't even know. I'll have to look it up later. But warfare within the parties. Is that going to, I mean, is RFK Jr. a real threat to Biden? I know he's polling double digits most of the time, sometimes getting close to 20% in some polls. Is he a real threat? Are the 7 or 8 non-Trump GOP contenders actually contenders or just pretenders? Is this kind of inter-party warfare, Dave Paleologos, is this really going to be a factor, do you think?
I think this cycle, it could be a factor with independent voters. In our last national poll, we found that people who were planning to vote for anybody but Trump, 1 in 5 were saying that they would not vote for Trump. And Trump voters would not vote for DeSantis, 1 in 5. So I think the sort of the civil war within each party, we found the same thing, by the way, in the Democratic side. We summed together the Kennedy and Williamson voters, and a high percentage, like in the 40s, would opt for a third party candidate. Same as I say on the Republican side. So it only opens the door for a Republican candidate, which is going to make everybody's life miserable, pollsters included. But the fact of the matter is that people don't like those two choices. I mean, in our last poll, 30% of voters 18 to 34 years of age would vote third party. 30. That's 3 times as many as 4 years ago. So these two choices are either going to have a muted turnout because of low enthusiasm, or people are just going to opt for a no labels candidate or who knows, and they're going to siphon off votes and really throw the election into a madhouse.
Yeah, and question is who will siphon off what from whom, right? I mean, if you're going to have 2
and where,
I guess it would be 4 parties. There might be 2 third parties out there, and you're right. It's hard to tell. I mean, and it could have enough of an impact that potentially could throw things into the House of Representatives, right?
Yeah,
that's I don't think anybody wants to see.
Yeah, no, no. I was going to say, my question to Dave was going to be, and he answered it, thankfully, was going to be, if those are the 2 choices, if it's Biden, Trump, is that going to just have people not come out to vote? Not thinking about the third party or fourth party aspect of it is just going to depress the vote. And then at that point in time, I think that's where incumbency may actually come in. So if we can merge those 2 eyes, because I think obviously the Democrats, unless the Republicans have learned, the Democrats have a far better machine in terms of turning out their vote. Yep. And having the levers of the presidency, I think would be important at that point. But yeah, I don't really see. I mean, I thought early on that RFK was gonna be a big challenge to Biden, and he may still. I mean, that obviously there's still plenty of time, but as the primaries and the caucuses start rolling forward, that's a very short window that he's got to operate. And I think the same thing goes. My fear in this at the beginning, from a Republican point of view, was going to be that DeSantis was going to be ahead of Trump, and that Trump was actually going to run as an independent, and thereby throw the election to the Democrats. But that obviously doesn't look like that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, one thing you alluded to, Dave Williams, earlier was the impact of the independent voter. And I guess I would add, suburban women as well, who make up a lot of the independent vote anyway. But I guess if Trump's the nominee, can he or really any Republican siphon off enough independent voters to win the presidency? I just saw a poll, Dave P. I'm not sure if it was yours or not, but that 2/3 of independents have a negative view of Trump nationally.
Doesn't necessarily mean they won't vote for him, but that they have an unfavorable opinion. I mean, I'll just jump in on the independents. We found from our polling that in the midterm elections, Democrat men and women voted the same, Republican men and women voted the same. Independent men voted Republican by 20 points. By 20 points in the midterms. The reason there wasn't a red wave is a lot of those Trump-endorsed Senate candidates lost because independent women broke from independent men. So that's the demographic the Republicans need to focus on, independent women, because they hurt the chances of a red wave. And we believe that the Roe versus Wade overturn was a big piece of that. And so now, if the economy totally unravels next year, it's not going to matter. Independent women will be more apt to vote Republican because of pocketbook issues. But things sort of stay the same, and economy is chugging along. That abortion issue you could see a repeat.
Hey guys, we only have the Zoom gods are swooping, so we only have maybe 5 minutes left. I wanted to talk about the non-traditional voting factor, because in 2020, as you all know, it resulted in the biggest turnout in presidential history. The fact that people predominantly voted non-traditionally, either mail-in, early voting, or absentee. Is that going to happen again? Is this the new normal, or was that just a one-off, you think? Because I think if it's a new normal, Democrats have another huge advantage because they're much better organized at getting out non-traditional voters.
Yeah.
So
unless the Republicans have learned their lesson, which you hear rumors that they have, I think this is the new normal. There's an old saying that once you open the doors to voting, once you crack it open, it's a wedge theory. You can never close it. So the more the door swings open, the more it's never going to close. I think there might be a crackdown in terms of some of the ways they were doing, like drop boxes, for example. But I think it's the new normal, and that's why I said the Republicans, I think, have to up their game in terms of vote harvesting, how they're going to identify voters, and the second George W. Bush, they did an excellent job in terms of voter ID and turnout, and then they seem to have forgotten how to use it. So I think they're getting up on that level once again, I think, is what's going to determine it. But I don't think we're going back.
Dave Paleologos, what do you think?
I'm going to agree. I'm going to agree with that. My gut 6 months ago was that people aren't going to be excited about the race and they're not going to vote. But I think David Williams is onto something. And the data point that I think about is we every so often poll unregistered, unlikely voters, and we do callbacks of people who have previously said they're not registered or they're not likely to vote. It's an easy retest. We're in the field right now with a similar poll, which we're going to release probably right after Labor Day. We can't get completes because people in that previous bad voter category are either registering or they're saying they are very or somewhat likely to vote.
Interesting.
And that's just anecdotal, but it informs me a little bit, and it makes me agree with David Williams' assessment that the door probably isn't going to shut, that we're in a new normal territory. And by the way, we're only in the middle of the field, but there are more people who are saying that if they were to vote, they would vote for Trump than Biden. So that potentially is a pool of people that not Biden could pull in, that Trump could pull in.
Interesting stuff. We're running out of time, and I want to just throw one last curveball at both of you guys. And if you don't want to answer it, I'm happy with it. Don't worry about it. You don't have to. But if you had to bet your house on who takes the oath of office on January 20th, 2025, who is it? If you want me to go first, I'll go first. Or
Well,
not.
who are we saying? Who are the candidates? Biden and Trump?
Well, throw it wide open. Who do you think from the
All right,
field?
you go first.
I think Joseph Robinette Biden is going to be reelected, and I'll tell you why. I think for many of the factors we talked about, the abortion issue being totally bungled by Republicans, the tremendous advantage Democrats, I think, still have, despite what Dave said, Dave Williams. I think they're still going to have a huge advantage in non-traditional voting. Not to mention the edge they always have in the Electoral College. And I think people are going to think that the economy is improving by next November. And I'm sure that the Federal Reserve and other organs of government are going to make sure that the perception is likely to be had. So with all of that together, I think Joe Biden's going to institute another basement strategy and have his surrogates go out and campaign for him, which will take away from his doddering problem. I mean, he pulled it off in 2020. Why not again? So I think all of that conspires to having him get a second term. I don't know, Dave Williams.
I'm going to go the other direction, assuming that it's I'm what I'm going to say is I don't believe it's going to be Biden. I think he's vulnerable because I don't think the economy. I don't think they're going to be able to massage the numbers in such a way that the economy looks better. I think the international situation is going to continue to deteriorate. There's not going to be any, we've talked about this before, any substantive decision in what happens in Ukraine. It's a stalemate. I think the crime issue is rising. I think immigration is another issue that's related to it. So at this point in time, I think that Trump is really going to leverage this whole persecution thing, and I think that's something that really resonates. I think people can see it. It reinforces that perception that there are two systems of justice here in America, and when people talk about white privilege. Hunter Biden is the biggest recipient of white privilege